Hello, folks. This is Nathan, and we're looking at another verse, a chapter of Scripture. I've skipped a lot, but things are a little bit different now. Got an audience of one. Right, so let's look at Genesis chapter 47. We ask the Lord's help with this passage. We're just going to go through verse by verse until we finish the second of three sections. All right. So, starting at verse 1. Then Joseph came and told Pharaoh and said, My father and my brethren and their flocks and their herds and all that they have are come out of the land of Canaan, and behold, they are in the land of Goshen. Now this is a very unremarkable verse. It's a very long verse, perhaps one of the longest in Scripture, I don't know. But does it really tell us much? Well, I think it does, yes. It reminds us at the head of this chapter, and of course, chapters are arbitrary. It tells us that Joseph is not just this free agent. He's not just this concerned with his own family. He is primarily, in his function, a prince of Egypt, you might say. He is an agent of Pharaoh. So he's reporting back to Pharaoh. And of course, this reminds us of the fact that Joseph is rather like Moses, both the prince of Israel and a prince of Egypt. So at the beginning, coming into the land, and then going out of the land. Joseph, then Moses. All right. So he's acting as the representative of his family on the one hand and of Pharaoh on the other. So we should remember that he is all through this thinking what's best for the people who I'm dealing with, but also what's best for Pharaoh, because what good servant is there? You're not much of a good servant if you don't think of the interests of your boss or your master or however you want to put it. And he also is not a rebel. A lot of people these days, it's like, if only the state were not there, things would be brilliant. Well, he's not such a fool. And he, as a great man of God, serves a heathen king. Oh, you can't do that. Well, we have so many examples of that being done, that very, very thing. And it's, shall we rebel against providence, the providence that God has put before us? All right. Now, verse 2. And he took some of his brethren, even 5 men, and presented them unto Pharaoh. Why 5? Which 5? Was it the strongest ones he took? Was it the weakest? Was it Benjamin? Was Benjamin there? We don't know. People have made guesses. But it's interesting, even numerologically. I mean, what is the 5 the number? Why not 7 or 3 or something a little bit more, or all 12? A little bit. We don't know. We don't know. And he, as a representative, because he is standing before Pharaoh's vicegerent, vice-regent, whatever, he presents them to Pharaoh. So for some reason, he wants Pharaoh to meet his brothers. And I think part of that reason is because he wants these select 5 in particular to have some access in the throne. And I think this would give them status to have seen Pharaoh and so on. And perhaps there was more interaction after that. Perhaps he would say, come on over here, talk to my brother. He's good at this. Yeah, you two should connect. Maybe that was going on. And in addition, we should just take time, put ourselves in that position and look around. Where are we? We're in a royal court. Okay. Oh, that's really unusual for the Bible. Of course it's not. It's the most normal thing in the world. Look what's happened already. We've had mention of the sons of God, which are the sons of the rulers, sons of the Elohim. We have Cain as being ruler of a city, so he has this title. We have some bad guys like Nimrod. We have the whole Babylon project. And then we have the righteous folks, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. They're always before these potentates, and especially Abraham and Isaac. They're always before Pharaoh. They're before Abimelech. So it's a very normal thing for these Old Testament patriarchs to be in a royal setting. After all, each of them in turn was recognized as a prince. You're a prince, you're a mighty prince among us. Okay. Is this relevant for us as humble people? Well, consider Proverbs 22:29. Do you see a man who excels in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before unknown men. My brother saw the king. Because of his craftsmanship. All right, Matthew 10:18. And ye shall be brought before governors and kings for my sake, for a testimony against them and the Gentiles. And how many of our brothers and sisters are brought before men of high rank to make a witness? So either way, we should not have too low an opinion of ourselves and just think of ourselves as worms and more worms and lots of worms. All right, enough of the worms already. Just let's have a balanced diet. And it's funny, isn't it? We notice a pattern as the previous patriarchs are brought into the presence of kings, of pharaohs, of Abimelechs, the king as his father. That's what Abimelech means. It's a title like Pharaoh. What happens every time that these patriarchs are brought before these mighty rulers? Everything is stripped from them and they're thrown in prison. Oh, no. They are materially blessed. We just got to notice that pattern. And we've got to say, God is able to do this. These are very significant people. After all, God is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. What happens here is not just a record of their lives. It's something more than that. So again, let's redraw the boundaries of who God is, as it were. All right, verse 3. And Pharaoh said unto his brethren, what is your occupation? And they said unto Pharaoh, thy servants are shepherds, both we and also our fathers. Now they could have said, you stinking monarchy, man. You stinking pagan, man. Something stupid like that. But he didn't. They didn't, because they were respectful. And remember what Jacob did himself when the bad boy brother came along. Him and all his household bowed down before him to show respect. They touched their foreheads on the ground in prostration. Anyway, and that's the word used for worship in the Old Testament. That's what worship is, to bow your head to the ground. So these were not stupid adolescent rebels. Take your Monica man and shovel with us, blah, blah, blah. All right, no. Interesting, Pharaoh here talks directly to the brothers. Why? Well, I suppose because they have standing, because of Joseph. Now, he had schooled them already. In the previous chapter, there's like 5, 6, 7 verses dedicated to saying, tell them you want to go into Goshen. Tell them you're farmers, your ranchers, because they hate ranchers. The idea of it makes them want to throw up, and you definitely want to go to Goshen. So this is something that's crucial. Okay, and it's interesting that God used pharaohs and the Egyptian ruling classes' prejudices against sort of dirty work, maybe you could say, cattle work, to secure a fortune for them, to secure a rich land, and to secure all those lovely cattle coming in to be under their management. Okay. And we should not forget either that all of the patriarchs before them, including Jacob and including his children, it did not vary. Their occupation did not vary. Abraham was rich, and it was very rich in cattle and in gold. All right. Can't get around it. That's what they did. This was the thing that would occupy most of their lives, not looking at their navel in a monastery, not being a pastor. They had the concerns of ranchers, farmers. All right. It says, we and also our fathers. So, our family history, let's never despise what our fathers do. When we think about, when we're younger, thinking of what to do, let's consider what our fathers and their mothers did, and our uncles, what have you. We should never neglect it or be ashamed of it. Now, they said, moreover, verse 4, unto Pharaoh, for to sojourn in the land are we come, but famine is sore in the land of Canaan. Now, therefore, give us Goshen. And so what's going to happen? They were facing annihilation. They were facing a very severe world crisis. Question: are we in a very serious, severe world crisis, life-threatening situation at the moment? Are we on the verge of nuclear war with everybody, I suppose, and in a land war in Europe, and with supply chain issues and huge demographic shifts, and just you name it, right down the line? And well, yes. So we should remember, this is the context. It's not a famine. It may be a famine. Some people are doing their best to provoke a famine by their policies. All right. But let's put ourselves in their shoes. And let's think, if God can do what they did for them back then in their world crisis, God can do the same in this world crisis. And we should not forget that this interaction here is, as it were, the culmination of his entire life to this point. All the disappointment, all the rejection, all those prophecies of ruling over his brothers and so on. This is all coming to fruition here. And and all of that was across much sufferings and testings of faith and battles and what have you. Verse 5. And Pharaoh spake unto Joseph as the representative of the brothers, as the acknowledged prince of Israel, as it were. He speaks to them. Yeah. Verse 6. And the land of Egypt is before thee. Are they going to get the petition? It looks like it's in the best of the land, make thy father and thy brethren to dwell. So he's given carte blanche to dwell there. In the land of Goshen, let them dwell. Now, is this all they're going to get, is land? No. And if thou knowest any men of activity among them, and then make them rulers over my cattle. Interesting dynamic. Interesting dynamic. Let's consider. What did Jacob himself do? He went to family member's house far away. His life was threatened. And, I remember he was given charge of a bad man, Laban, very tricksy man, of a bad man's livestock. And this is, and because he was put in charge of his livestock and he struck deals, let's do this, do that. Because he did this, because he worked and was faithful, he was tremendously blessed in this. But the point I want to underscore is that that was the fact that a godly men, and they weren't entirely all godly, were they? But they were coming along, especially Judah and maybe Benjamin. He was probably a very good spud. And let's think of what God can do for us, and God can move the heart of a pagan king or business leader to take charge of their portfolio of stocks, their whatever it happens to be, or cattle. And thereby, just like Jacob, we can profit in our responsible stewardship of that. So part of that salvation is increased responsibility. We can say that. Now, this is a world crisis. Things are so bad that folks are facing starvation. They, being a very rich people, very rich in gold and silver and all sorts, they were able to pay cash money. The Egyptians, maybe, they were definitely richer than the average Egyptian, this lot. The wealth was built up over the course of time. So what the Egyptians were facing, I don't think this lot faced, but it came to the point where they really were looking down the barrel of losing everything, perhaps including their lives. All right. So in a time of extreme crisis like that, what can we say? What does he say? He says, and if thou knowest any men of activity, that's the King James, 1900. This is the Net Bible. If you know any highly capable men, how else is it put? ESV, extra special version. The best of that. If you know any able men, you get the idea, you get the picture. In a time of crisis, It doesn't matter if you're pagan or whatever. You will want, forget about this DEI business, whatever, doesn't really matter. In a crisis, the powerful need desperately to find capable men. So whatever you do, one of the things you need to do is to make sure that you're a capable man or woman, but a capable man in particular. So seek God's grace to do your work to God's glory. If you don't have a trade, learn a trade. Learn to do it well. Learn to be dependable. Show up on time. All those things require the grace of God and character and time. But here's a rule for us to live by. In the time of crisis, everything else goes to the wall except the capable men. And Joseph, verse 7, brought in Jacob his father, so as an audience, and he blesses Pharaoh. Why should a godly man bless an ungodly man? Well, remember Abraham blessed Esau, but did not Jacob. Esau, that's right. No, Isaac. No, that's wrong. Ishmael, I'm thinking of. Well, all right. So there's kind of precedence for that. But he surely would have blessed him for what he did, because essentially he saved his son, lifted him up from the prison, and additionally, effectively saved them. Now, why this special audience? Because Hebrews 7:7 says that the lesser is blessed by the greater. Why did he submit to be the lesser, even though he was the god King Pharaoh? Well, because of the huge respect for age in antiquity. I think that's basically it. But it is kind of an unusual exchange and should give us pause for thought. He tells him how hard his days were. I'm not sure why he said that, but except that it was true, it was on his heart. Why he didn't rejoice, I don't know, but we can hardly blame him. He's had troubles he was in his mother's womb. He was in a fight in his mother's womb, an ongoing fight with his brother. He had it very rough, and he's been having it rough while he's in heaven as well. Commentators just won't get off his back. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh, a second blessing. The second blessing doctrine has some validity to it. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out. So entering the scene and leaving the scene is like a little drama, except it's a big one. Now, Joseph placed his father and his brethren. So this indicates that he is the main heir, because the main heir has the responsibility to care for the father. He is effectively the heir, as Jacob was the heir, not Esau, as Isaac was the heir, not Ishmael. How do we know? He gets the responsibility. All right. So, and give them possession. Aha, there's a word here. Verse 11. Just a place, but gave them a possession in the land of Egypt. Now, did they get land? Yes, they got land. Did they get extra responsibility, which meant an opportunity for increasing wealth and contacts and all this stuff? Yes. Did they get more? Yes, they got more. In fact, this you can look upon as being... Oh boy, there's so much that I've written down that I haven't mentioned, which is probably good. I've been skipping my notes since 6. All right. Oh, skipping the notes. So, and Joseph placed his father. Not only did they get that, in fact, this was like the occupation of the land of Canaan that was to come. So there are huge parallels there in that not only did they get the land as they did in Canaan, but they got the houses and wells too, because that possession means substantive property like houses and wells and infrastructure. So either the people were cleared off the land, or more probably the land was abandoned as people became destitute, as we will see later on in the chapter, and moved into these newly built cities in the land of Ramesses. And Joseph nourished his father and his brethren. So this really is the ongoing culmination, because to rule over your brethren, as was prophesied, was not just a punctual thing where he saw them bow down and that was it. No, to rule over someone is something that happens on an ongoing basis. And on an ongoing basis, he provided literally from the stores of Pharaoh their bread. Give us this day our daily bread. He was really and truly their lord, their prince. All right, now there's a shift here. Verses 1 to 12, there's the audience, and then there's this blessing. Blessing, blessing upon blessing upon blessing upon blessing, whereby the people of God, through the faithfulness to the covenant, they weren't always faithful, but they never apostatized. They were still in relationship with God, especially Jacob and Joseph, and Judah was coming along, and Benjamin. Well, they were simply blessed, and we must grasp the fact that God is able. God is very able, without any problem, without breaking a sweat, in this time of world crisis, of providing for his people, not just the bare necessities, but of giving them so much when everybody else is losing, as we shall see in the following verses, losing everything. And, of course, people are losing things bit by bit by bit, losing living standard, the ability to drive a car, the ability to eat what you want, and all down the line. There was no bread in the land, all the land, for the famine was very sore. So the land of Egypt and all the land of Canaan fainted by reason of famine. So these guys, they're like 1984 famine, just ready to collapse. They're so weak. Really, really bad situation. And of course, we are not in that situation presently. Things aren't that bad. But as I've said before, there are policies in place, many policies in place, where these non-entity bureaucrats are creating the conditions for famine. And if you can create the conditions for famine, guess what? Famine will come. Now, what did Joseph do in all this? Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt. So he's in receipt of the money. We saw that play out in the previous chapters with his brothers. Right? He took the money, gave them corn, and what happened? He gathered up all the money. Verse 15, and the money failed. This is not just a crisis of no food. This is a crisis where the money supply completely disappears, evaporates, even though it was sound money. Hard money. All they had was their labour, what they had in the soil, their bodies, their lands, which, anyway, things aren't as bad as they are as now as they were then, but we have to think of parallels here, because it was a world crisis and the money system just evaporated. So does that mean the end of life? Well, in this case, no. So how does God deal with this? Well, with a just ruler, a just and capable ruler, and this is what we should be, just and capable rulers in our own domain. All right, all the Egyptians came unto Joseph and said, give us bread, for why should we die in thy presence? For the money faileth. Okay, so this is their desire. Now, it says all the Egyptians, that just means the poor people wearing sackcloth in generic Egyptian robes. No, it does not. It means the very richest, the oligarchs, the business leaders, the middling income people, just everybody. What happens in famine? Everybody's affected apart from the super duper 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 elite who have political power, have the troops, whatever. Everybody was affected. And everybody will be affected in the coming crisis. Can't hide behind your money, especially if you've spent it all on food. All right, so what does Joseph do? Does he seize their cattle? No, verse 16. He makes a deal. Oh, making a deal, that's terrible. Why does he make a deal? He makes a deal. Give us your cattle and I'll give you the money. This is not Stalin. This is not him at the point of a spear saying, give me your stuff. This is a deal made free and clear to a people who had come to him, who was standing in the person of Pharaoh, for help. We cannot want people, we cannot desire people into, making the right decision, as it were. We can't desire people into turning to God in a time of crisis. People always turn to their God in times of crisis. So that God may be their self, like they're anarchists. I don't have no ruler. Or there may be statists. Oh, state. Oh, Bill, save us. Bill, save us. But They'll just do according to their nature. And God in his grace provided a wise ruler, not just for Israel, but for Egypt as well. How good God is. How good he is to all people. He makes the rain to fall on the just, on the unjust, unjust. So, and the deal's done. They bought the cattle and horses, and he fed them. Now, where did the cattle go to? Different places. Where did the best of the cattle go to? Went to Goshen, who had charge of it there. Aha! Joseph's brothers, the righteous, the covenant keepers. Although some of them were quite a bad bunch. But I believe, just as with Judah, the Lord was working in all of them. That makes me think of a scripture. The wealth of the righteous is laid up for the just. What happens in a time of crisis? Well, make sure you're capable men. Or if you're a ruler, make sure you're a wise and capable ruler. Whatever you're in, whatever field you're in. So they come to him, they make a deal together, they agree upon it, it's a free exchange, and that's what happens. And they run out of food, they get a year's worth of food, however the arrangement worked. Second year they come to him and says, you can't pretend we ran out of food, all we've got is our bodies and our lands. So let's make a deal. We're going to die. That's the stakes. They're going to either they die or they accept the deal. Fine, okay. But we don't want to be lazy people. We want to work. So give us seed. All right. Now, they're concerned, interestingly, and this is very relevant to our condition, is at the end of verse 19, that we may live and not die, and the land be not desolate. What does that mean? It just that the land won't grow anything for that year, but will grow stuff the following year? No. If the land isn't kept in constant cultivation, it'll go back to wilderness, and wilderness takes years and years and years and years and years of work to bring back into cultivation. What is the UK government doing at the central government doing at the moment? It's paying farmers to create famine conditions by taking land out of use. That is very hard to bring back into use. What about those solar farms and agricultural land? The same. Desolation. This is what the policies of godless people bring. Desolation. And with the desolation, of course, death. But these people were wiser than our leaders. They said, look, if we don't look after the land. So they had a care for the land. They were not lazy people. They wanted to work. But their orientation was basically false. Their orientation was to the state as saviour. Now, please remember that the half-Egyptian Ishmael, son of Abraham, son of Hagar, cried out to God. And God said, I'm not going to listen to you, half-Egyptian. No, he did not. He answered his prayer straight away and saved him. So if these full Egyptians had turned to him, they too would have known God's salvation. All right, think about that. What a good God God is. So they make the deal. Now, so they bought all the land. Everyone sold their field. The land became Pharaoh's. How should we understand this? Now, in fascism, you have title to the land, but effectively the crown or the state owns the land. The parliament, whatever it is, owns the land. And with communism, officially, it's the state totally from top to bottom that controls everything. And this, as it were, is a move from fascism to communism, except this was not the beast, the last beast with metal grinding claws and so on. It's more of a benevolent beast, you might say. Pharaoh didn't want his own people dead. So, what do they do? There's a bit of confusion about verse 21. It's different in the Masoretic text than it is in the Septuagint, but at the end of the day, the commentators say, well, it says he removed them from cities, and that doesn't make sense. Taking all these people and moving them into the city. But what I think happens here, what I'm pretty sure is happening, is that there's a core of people that stay in the land, to work in the land, to make sure it's not desolate, but the people are moved. Why the people moved to cities? Well, for one thing, that's just what states do. Centralization leads to urbanization. All right, that's one phenomenon. Another thing is that, the grain facilities were built initially during the 7 years of plenty by Joseph, by the grace of God, the Holy Spirit working in his life, making him able. And so what? If you move those cities next to the grain silos, then that makes it easier to distribute. This is just something I've come up with. I think it holds water. It also would glorify Pharaoh. Say to Pharaoh, "There's a great plan here. We're going to call this Pharaopolis the first or Pharaopolis the second, and it's going to be great. It's going to be huge. It's going to be the best ever." Besides, what else are you going to spend the money on? Because he's got all this endless money flowing in from the whole land of Egypt and from all the surrounding lands, so he's got to spend it on something. But I think this was quite benevolent again and wise, because he's giving them something to do. He's building cities and all that kind of stuff. So trade will go on and life will go on and so on. And it would be more difficult and would mean loss of grain just to ship all these grain supplies to far distant villages. Let's keep a skeleton crew going. They can live off the produce there. Keep everything up to tip-top condition. Anyway, so everybody was moved off the land. And of course, this is the plan around the Western world to move people off the land because hashtag environment something or other, I'm not sure what, and 15-minute blah, blah, all this kind of stuff, 15-minute cities, whatever it happens to be, But I think that's just the instinct that's just what a centralized people, a people who look to the state for solutions, just like a servant to as master, like a maid to a lady's hand. And their instinct is to run to the state, and you can't offer them godly solutions because they're not godly people. They don't want freedom. It's like there is a differentiation in the law of God, for example, between the godly and the ungodly when it comes, for example, to selling food. You can sell them pork. You can sell them meat that's been torn by animals that's not been bled in the law. I might have made the pork one up, but certainly the torn one, torn animals, which would be an abomination to any right-thinking person. Why? Because their standards are not your standards. So as long as you're being open and honest, as Joseph is in making these deals, saying, well, you're going to lose your freedom, you're going to lose your land, okay, we accept, then you can't will them to want to be free. The freedom and salvation for the covenant people was a new land. Here's a land, you do with it what you will. Here's an opportunity, here's more responsibility, look after my cattle. That was their salvation, in part. Whereas the salvation for a hard-working people, you'll have to say, they didn't want to be on the dole, to be on welfare. But a statist-oriented people was rather different, a rather different solution. And Joseph, like a wise ruler, knew the people and knew what they were capable of. All right. I hope you're enjoying. I hope you're getting something from this. I hope this is profiting you. Just let me know in the comments. Hit me up in the WhatsApp. Now, where are we here? Interestingly, he didn't touch the priest's land. Well, Joseph was so powerful, why didn't he crush the priests of Egypt? Because the priests of Egypt were bad. Well, so was Pharaoh, but that wasn't his job. His job was very limited. It's rather like when Jesus was asked to be a ruler over and be a judge in the dispute over two people who were arguing about their inheritance. He said, look, nobody made me a judge over you. It's not my role. So he wasn't given the job of a social reformer. He was employed by Pharaoh to be and appointed by God to be an administrator over an ungodly people. And that's what he did. He knew the priests because he was married to a priest's daughter. And he knew that they were vital for the stability of Egypt. And so he did not change a thing. Just didn't change anything. Kept things going as they were. Now, right, so he's coming back now to the deal. said to the people, here's your seed, sow the land. Okay, so we're concluding the agreement. And here's my terms. So, the question is, well, what am I going to have to pay? I'm really living as a tenant farmer or a serf. So what's my tallage, I think is the word that they use in the feudal language. Do I owe like a fixed amount, whether you have a good harvest or a bad harvest? Do I have to convert my grain into money and then give you a tenth or 20? How's it all going to work? Okay, I'll tell you what. Precise legal language, and it should come to pass in the increase. So it's just the increase. If they have 100 bushel month or a year season, then they would get paid 20 bushels. If they have a 1,000 bushel season, then they would pay 200. So it's out of the increase. And in legal language, he says 1/5 for Pharaoh, 4/5 for you, for all that you need. And he shows his heart of compassion, and he shows his desire that Pharaoh's reign would continue by saying, and for your little ones. So again, that heart of compassion and the heart of a wise ruler is revealed. He's not just thinking about himself, and he's not just thinking about this generation, but the next generation. And this wise ruler loved children. Some of the rulers today, well, we're not really sure if they like children. And verse 25, and they said, Joseph, that's a terrible deal. You're a communist. I hate you. You're enslaving us. It's awful. It's the worst deal ever. Well, no. What did they say? And they said, thou hast saved our lives. So who are you going to trust? The word of God and the people that were there at the time, or some German or English person or American who said, Joseph was a socialist. Joseph was a... Well, you probably want to, if you're sensible and you don't hate the word of God, and you're probably going to take, you're definitely going to take these guys' word for it. They were there at the time. They thought it was a really brilliant deal. We'll be Pharaoh's servants. They freely agreed to be in some sort of a serf relationship with Pharaoh. That's fine. That's great. That's brilliant. You've saved us. And again, it takes wisdom to come up on the fly with this plan to respond to a 7-year period of plenty and a 7-year famine. That comes from the Holy Spirit, who gives the ability to, amongst other things, to rule wisely. And this plan was the Holy Spirit plan given to rule a people who weren't really prepared to be free, as the covenant people would have been prepared to have been free. So, and interestingly, and this is the last verse that I'm going to deal with, verse 26. How long has it been? I don't know. 40 minutes maybe. Hope you're enjoying this. Hope you're getting something from it. Yeah, 37 minutes. All right. Now, I haven't considered this before, and maybe you haven't considered either. I don't know. How would I know? But think about it. The stuff that Joseph's been doing before, building cities, organizing people to collect grain and all this kind of stuff, it's rather technical and administrative. Go and do that and separate out the seed corn and things like that. But this is different. This is a legal reform. So he's changing laws. So he has to, that's another aspect of his rulership, bringing in a law. And here's something to consider. Considering that, and I didn't go into this at all, the 20%, was it a 20% tax, and was it just? Because 1 Samuel 8 says that a 10% tax is a sign of tyranny. Was it a 10% tax? No, was it a 20% tax? Well, let's consider it. The meaning of the word, the increase and so on the crop, that's given by a guy called A.S. Yehuda as being, as making reference in the linguistic history of the thing at the time and examining other uses of the word. He says, look, this is just from the grain. And that makes sense. All right. And grain was one of the crops, but the staple crop. But they grew leeks, they grew melons, and they also, many of them would have access to fish, either as fishermen or in the secondary market. So it was a 20% tax on the increase of one amongst several of their crops. This is not to mention the cattle, the animal husbandry aspect of things. So I think you can safely conclude that this did not amount to a 10%, even to a 10% tax. That is my... and of course, not everybody was a farmer, so it only affected the farmers, so it wasn't a monetary tax. So I think we can safely conclude then that this may well have been a great innovation for liberty and godliness, and as far as an ungodly people can tolerate godly laws. But it would seem to be that this was a very positive step forward in that, they were delighted with it, and Pharaoh, he was delighted with it. He had all the money in the world, and he owned everything. So already, yeah. So, wow, what a chapter this is. And we've just scratched the surface. There's so much more that could be said there. But let's just quickly resume. We've gone through two halves. The first half, apart from the introductions that were made, the first half deals with, I'm going to make a noise. It's my hips. First half, tremendous promotion, inheritance by the godly in a very difficult time, in a time of complete destitution, near death, all just the worst of times. So, what can God do in our times? Well, can he provide just enough so we live and survive? Well, yes. In fact, that's what God provided for the Egyptians, a bare subsistence. Can God do more? Does God favor the righteous? Well, yes, he does, and this plays out here. They are the inheritors of the cattle that they had to sell, that the Egyptians had to sell, for instance. They had the best of the land. They had all this infrastructure, thing after thing after thing. And Numbers 11:5 talks about how in the land of Goshen there was even a good supply of fish, which not everybody would have had. So there's so much that they got beyond, so much further beyond a mere subsistence. They inherited, the dynamic there was promotion and increase in a time of great penury. So God is not restrained in his ability to prosper his people in difficult times. Not one bit, not a bit of it. And they went from penury and facing death and ruin so very quickly by how? By God's planning, by God putting the right person in the right place at the right time, through his providence, through his prophetic word given to that person, and so on. So let's never say God can't do this, even whispering under our breath. Let's say, wow, God did this for them. God's the same God. He can do this and more, exceedingly abundantly more than all they could have asked or imagined. So let's remember who God is and how gracious God is in a time of judgment, that he should provide even for the Egyptians. Very gracious to give the gift of wise governance that Joseph offered. He's had compassion on people who were idolaters. Let's not limit his compassion. They had a salvation, as it were, from famine. Of course, they weren't saved. They didn't know the true God. They didn't worship the same God. They were looking to the state for salvation. But God said, through my grace, I'm going to offer them not a Pharaoh solution, but a Joseph solution, as it were. So lots to learn. We also learned about the importance of being an able person, a capable person, no matter what your job is, no matter if you're a man or a woman, in a crisis, regardless of all the stuff that's going on at the moment with DEI. As the crisis advances, and it will advance, as the crisis advances, the people that matter will want and need and absolutely jump on with, checkbook in hand, as it were. Responsible people, capable people. And the capable people should be the godly people. Godliness should be leading you to greater and greater ability to govern and rule in your domain, be it cattle or administration or carbon fiber technologies or whatever it happens to be. So let's not forget that. And let's not forget that even with the full collapse of the monetary system, still God was able to work a salvation. So we can't make these materialistic predictions saying, well, if the money supply goes, then ... Because, well, God is able and God is gracious and merciful and can work these things out. So lots to think about there. If you have any questions or comments, put them in the thingamajig below. And yeah, I'm going to sign off. And I'm sorry I don't upload more of these videos, but I do what I can. All right, folks. God bless. Cheerio.